The amount of pellets in a stand has a pretty good correlation to the number of hares, and then that's compared to the number of lynx. There's different stands, they're called, with different forest treatments. And there's 50 stakes that have just been kind of randomly put out within the stand. This site is a control site. The Forest Service hasn't come in and done any thinning or anything like that. It's just all natural. The control site just kind of gives us a base of if nothing had been done, that's how many hares would be in the area. Working on a project that has to do with lynx success, sometimes it's kind of hard, like I forget while I'm out here just counting rabbit poop all the time. I kind of have to stop and remind myself that it's important data because it's keeping tabs on what the lynx are doing and how they're surviving up here. They've got an incredible background in Colorado. The lynx are kind of a little shimmer of hope because they've done so well. I knew it. GPS has done me wrong.
Defining success with a reintroduction is kind of a difficult thing to do. We want to make sure that they're here decade after decade after decade. And so the way to do that is to implement some sort of a long-term monitoring program.
Jake started to design a protocol of how to monitor this population of lynx that were spread out throughout the San Juans, low density, and rarely observed.
It's hard to get a handle on them. You can't just go out into an area and count the number of lynx. You can't just go out there and observe them and say, yep, they're still here. So what we're left with is going into these units and trying to find evidence that they're here.
We have grids set up on the
Recording in progress.
Good evening. Today is Monday, October 20th, 2025, and this is the Historic Commission Preservation Commission meeting. We'll have a roll call, please.
And forgive me, I'm still learning everybody's names. Chair Haley.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Beauchamp.
Here.
Did I say that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Berg.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Whidden.
Here.
And Commissioner Wilt.
Here.
Thank you. All right, in our agenda tonight, we'll have an approval for our agenda unless there's any changes.
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then we have our approval of minutes, and these are January to December of 2024. Is that the whole year? So did everyone read through all 12 months? Yeah. That was expected.
Have we done this previously?
Well, we just didn't have any, we just didn't review them monthly like we usually do. And so we've been able to skip over that for a lot of months. So now we're going to approve all of them.
Okay.
If you want to break them up over time, if you prefer, we can do
Does
that.
anyone feel like they need to go back through and
No.
read specific notes about anything?
I wasn't on the committee then, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
recused from this one.
Do you want more time on these, or?
No, I've reviewed them, and I think
Yeah.
I don't have any concerns with any of the minutes.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from January through December of 2024.
I'll second.
And all those in favor? Aye. And any public comments that are not on our agenda this evening? I'm seeing none. We'll move to our public hearing. Our first one is 1016 Main Street for landmark designation. We'll have a staff presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jess Daniels. I'm a senior planner, and the first case is a landmark designation for 1016 Main Street. So for context, this property is designated under the National Register of Historic Places. This occurred in 1986. A demolition request was received earlier this year, and a stay was placed on the property, which expired on September 1st. The city purchased the property in August using the Historic Preservation Fund with the intent to landmark the property, resell it, and reimburse the HBF fund. So the photos show the conditions over time of the property from the early 1900s to present day. The property meets the landmark criteria as the building was constructed around 1910, possibly earlier, satisfying the 50-year-old requirement. It exemplifies specific elements of an architectural style or period that is Queen Anne. What is that? Okay. That is Queen Anne style, which is relatively rare in Louisville. And in terms of its physical integrity, it has maintained that Queen Anne style architecture and front gabled roof. Its location on Main Street is important for the community's identity, and it appears to have remained in the same location and setting since its construction, and it's likely a kit house. The social history of 1016 Main Street also includes association with Italian immigrant history and mining history. So as the property meets the landmark criteria, staff recommend approval of Resolution Number 10, Series 2025, recommending approval to the City Council of a landmark at 1016 Main Street to be named the Petrelli del Pizzo House, and the landmark incentive would be passed on to the new property owner. That concludes the staff presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I do have one, and this might lead us into our next discussion, but I think I brought this up at our previous meeting. The landmark incentive is good for 18 months following landmarking. And I asked last meeting what would be the case if, for whatever reason, that the property didn't sell for another 2 years. Would the new buyer not be eligible for the grant request? And I believe Rob might have mentioned that it could be written into the sales agreement that it would be from potentially this time of the sales, 18 months. Would that still be the case, or is that what you're thinking?
Yes, so we actually have it under contract, and that is written into the current contract to sell it, is that from the incentive, which is actually 3 years, so the new owner would receive the bonus, and then they would also have a 3 years, right, to apply for grants, not from the time of landmarking, but from the time that they purchase it. It's written into the agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Any comments from the public on this property? And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the discussion for the commission.
I'm not sure if my discussion should be held off until the next property, because it rolls directly from this with the transfer of grant incentives. As in the next property, there's a request from the new owners to get a rollover from the previous owners who didn't take advantage of their grant. Do we want to discuss how this is going to affect future cases, Or do we not want to discuss that until we get to the next one and just keep this a total separate thing?
Keep it totally separate, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think landmarking is sort of the natural outcome of the steps that have happened prior to this. The city, we all relatively recently discussed purchasing this, kind of unique opportunity that the city had to do this, and which we've never done before. And we all, I believe unanimously voted to purchase this with the intent of it being landmarked, and set aside the funds to do that. So I don't have any questions on this. It seems like the logical next step.
Yeah, I think we would not have purchased it had it not been eligible for landmarking. So it definitely meets all of our requirements of 50 years or older, strong social history, and strong architectural integrity. So.
I would agree.
So do I. I think it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, someone can make a motion. This is Resolution 10, Series 2025.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution Number 10, Series 2025, to approve the landmarking of 1016 Main Street.
I'll second.
And we'll do a roll call, please. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw
Nope,
you.
you're totally fine. I'm still new at this, so.
No, you're great.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Beauchamp,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilt.
Yes.
Okay, did I get everybody?
I think that's everybody. Yep. So that's great. And it's great that we possibly have a under contract. And so this is a great first time for us, it sounds like. Did you want to give any updates to that, or is that good?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so we were very fortunate to put it under contract for the price that we have purchased it for. So we're hoping to recoup all of the Historic Preservation Fund that we purchased it for. So we would probably, once we complete part of the contract, is we have to complete the landmarking process, and then we would close with the new owners, hopefully near the end of November.
Excellent.
That's great. Yeah, thank you.
I like the name of the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, and our next public hearing is for 701 Lincoln Avenue. And this is a grant request, and we'll have a staff report.
Okay, the next case is a grant request for 701 Lincoln Avenue, located at the intersection of Lincoln Ave and Pine Street. The photos show the conditions of the property over time between 1948 and October 2025. The grant request is for $35,095, which is half the total project cost of $70,191, primarily for siding, porch repair, and a window replacement project. A historic structure assessment was completed for the property in 2018, which recommended limited scope for the project and estimated the total cost to be around $8,100 for that scope recommended in the HSA. The project work did not begin until 2024, which was a 6-year lapse from the recommendations in the HSA, and staff did not find any of the work to be eligible for extraordinary circumstances, as the scope falls within typical preservation and restoration work. As the property was landmarked in 2015, it's subject to the resolutions in effect at that time as per the current resolution, and that section is referenced here. So under the resolution that the property was subject to, that's resolution number 2, 2012, section 3, it states that for a period of 18 months from when a property is declared a landmark, it is eligible for a grant from the HPF in the amount of $5,000. However, that request expired in 2016, which was almost 10 years ago. So for these reasons, staff recommend denial of the grant request due to ineligibility. And this is because the property was landmarked in 2015, and under that funding resolution in place at that time, the deadline to apply for grants was 18 months following the approval of the landmark. There's no showing of extraordinary circumstances to extend the timeline to consider the grant request. The current property owner acquired the property in 2018 and didn't begin some of the scope in the HSA until 2024. And that HSA included limited scope for the work on the porch and replacement of limited siding for the condition presented in 2018. The grant requests are typical restoration and rehabilitation work, and there's no extraordinary circumstances that delayed that work. And finally, the windows that were replaced were not historic and not eligible for grant funding. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions, and the property owner is also here and may like to say a few words as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
No.
I'm sorry, I do have a question. Just wanted to make clear on the timeline. It appears it was landmarked in 2015, but it appears the HSA wasn't done until 2018,
That's correct.
so it was landmarked without an HSA? Okay.
Well, was that our previous format of how we did it? So you could landmark and then choose to do the HSA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just to confirm, what I think the slide said is that at the time, $5,000 was the maximum grant allowed.
That's correct, but they had to request that within 18 months.
Understood.
Yeah, so that would have been 2016.
And if I could just add, we had a lot of discussion when we updated the resolution in 2019 about eligibility of these older landmarks. And, part of the reason for limiting it is, we have to be able to manage the fund over time. So certainly, we have over 60 landmarks, and this is intended to be an incentive. So having property owners come back over time as we update the resolutions, we decided that wasn't kind of a responsible way to administer the grant program, because we wouldn't be able to account for funds that wasn't serving as an incentive. We did throw in an extraordinary circumstances clause, so if there is some unusual circumstance that, that there may be a reason to approve a grant outside of that time frame, but otherwise, there was a conscious effort to limit the grant amounts in 2019 to those previous resolutions. So it also helps to not cause confusion, so that when somebody landmarks prior to a new funding resolution, it's clear what they're eligible for from a monetary standpoint, because we keep increasing the grant amount. So for example, we have a grant resolution on the agenda tonight that's going to significantly increase the grant amounts. So having all the properties that were landmarked over the last 6 years since 2019, having them all come back and start asking for additional funds under the new resolutions, that could be problematic for managing the funds, and also the intent of them being incentives to landmark. It's not meant to be a property maintenance tool, it's meant to be an incentive. So that's what's playing into staff's recommendation.
And so the 5,000, that's the total that the grant request could be asked for back then? Or is that just the?
Yeah, so at that time, 5,000 was the max. So when they were landmarked in 2015, they would have had 18 months to come in for a grant request up to $5,000.
Okay. Any other questions?
I need a second to compose
No,
my
you're
question.
great.
I'm just
Yeah, we
thinking
have
through
time.
it.
No
It's kind of a
problem. No rush.
complicated,
Yeah.
looking at all these date lines
Right.
and everything. I'm curious. I've been looking back through the comprehensive plan and city council's desires for what they're looking for help with the preservation of the properties that we look at and the promotion of the programs. And I'm curious to what exact, or I guess it wouldn't be exact things, if we're looking at extraordinary issues that would be considered acceptable to look at passing along the incentives from a landmark, is not the sale of the property after the landmarking happening to a new property owner and the person who received the landmark approval not taking any of the grant incentive benefits. Don't we want to promote the next owner of it to do what we were hoping to be done by the first owner of the house who didn't follow through with it for whatever reason? It looks like it's an opportunity to maybe alter or just put this in as one possible extraordinary circumstance where we still want to get this house to stay preserved for time going forward. The amount of work that it was far in exceeding the $5,000 max. I fully understand the reasoning for saying, here's what was approved. I'm just leaning towards the ideas of debating with everyone, should we be looking at making this a condition that can happen on a regular basis? If you sell your house, this is probably the number one thing I hear when I tell people I'm new on this committee. Number one thing I hear from the public in our community is, well, I don't want to landmark my property. Then you've got all these restrictions and nobody's going to want to buy it. So if we can take away some roadblocks, I'm all for it. And if we can show by doing an approval of something like this that we do have some flexibility and case by case you look at it. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on this.
Well, we'll probably bring that for discussion, probably a bit. Yeah. So we'll bring that back for discussion. So if you have a specific question for staff about that, but we'll bring it.
Still learning the protocol.
No, I think that's great because I think we do need to figure that out. So I don't know if you have any feedback on that specific.
I would just answer by, very many of our landmark properties sell over time. So the scenario that I brought up about, landmark properties, even over the last 5 years, they're going to sell. And, again, the intent is this is an incentive to landmark. We do want, but once you own the property and the property changes hands, which is a very common thing, I think that's a policy decision. And I think we'll be able to discuss that in our new resolution. In the resolution that's in effect and relates to this application, that was not the case. So we're reviewing this application under the 2019 resolution, which has a very clear intent not to allow people to come back and ask for grant funds without, a real clear need to do so. So the selling of the property, I think in staff's opinion, has no relevance. It's really if the condition of the property is extraordinary in some way. But I would recommend that you focus on the standards that have been adopted and established in your consideration of this request.
And so it was landmarked in 2015, and then when was it sold?
2018, and the work didn't.
So that's okay.
The work didn't begin until 2024.
Okay.
Wait, it was landmarked in 2015 or 2018?
It
15.
was 15, and then the HSA
Or it came in after
and the
fact.
sale was both in 2018, and
That's
then the
right.
work started in 2024.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I think I would just add, we support HSAs if they weren't done previously. We support doing HSAs because it helps property owners know what the condition of the property is, as well as what they need to do to maintain and potentially restore the property to maintain it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the purpose of the HSA post-grant eligibility is a way to determine additional grant eligibility, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Do we have any idea how many landmark properties have gone through without any grant money being requested or work being done? I know we've had a couple this year where the property owners want to landmark their property just because they believe in preserving their home with no intention of doing any work. Do we have any? I know it's about managing our funds, and I think that is important, but I'm just curious how many potential projects are out there that,
We don't have that information.
yeah, okay.
Any other questions for staff specifically?
Nope.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Did they want to say anything or?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dan Weller. I live at the Vaughn House with my wife Ariel and two boys, Theo and Benny. Thanks for taking the time to hear my case, and thanks to Jess for putting in all the work to prepare the presentation. I hope I wasn't too annoying with all my emails and all that. Just wanted to make a few points. One was, yeah, I understand we're ineligible according to the rules. Jess and team have been very clear about that. But my hope is that at the very least we can get the conversation going. And it kind of sounds like you're already doing that because it does, biased opinion, it does feel like there's a little bit of a gap in cases where you've purchased your historic home and that window is already closed for grant money. So I think you guys nailed down the timeline pretty well, but it was landmarked in 2015 by the previous owner. They did the HSA. We purchased the home later in 2018. And then we started our project in 2014, I guess, or 2024, sorry, technically. So, and then yeah, as Jess confirmed, no grant money has been spent on the property besides the initial incentive. So when we bought the house, all of the work that was in the HSA still needed to be done. In addition to everything that was identified in the inspection when we purchased the house, and those took priority for us. There was $7,000 of a main sewer line to repair, and $4,500 on a main electrical panel, which I was told would catch fire if we didn't do anything about it. So the other work had to take a back seat. We had 2 kids and lived through a pandemic before we actually pulled the trigger on doing this project. One thing I wanted to highlight so Jess had the side-by-side comparison of what was in the HSA and what we did. And the numbers are vastly different in costs. And we would have loved for those numbers to remain the same in what was in the HSA. But as I assume is often the case with these old houses, you don't really know what you're getting into until you get started. And in our case, with the siding, our general contractor had estimated, yeah, it's just going to replace some siding here and there. But once we brought in the siding expert, they were like, you can't really do that without damaging the rest of the siding. It makes more sense to just replace all of it. So that blew up the cost. And then with the porch, same thing. We thought we'd just replace a few boards here and there and kind of stabilize it a bit. As soon as the contractors got into it, they found there were 2 posts that had been built up, so they weren't solid beams. They were rotting at the bottom, and they were supporting the roof. And so it was determined that that's very critical, and we need to fix that. And also, when they pulled up the boards of the porch, they found that there were some gaps in the foundation that needed to be filled in because that was not up to code either. So the city inspector had come by and said, yeah, you're going to need to bring an engineer in and pretty much just rebuild the whole porch. So that obviously caused the costs to balloon as well. So, and I think the last thing that I wanted to say was it was related to, one other thing was just that, yeah, as everybody probably knows, costs are also inflated because you're often using materials that are not standard to stay true to the original house, right? So that was our case with the siding, which our contractor estimated was a 50% increase in the cost, as opposed to if we just used standard siding. And then the last thing I was going to say was just we came across an issue. This is just kind of for your interest if you hadn't heard it yet. There was a little bit of a conflict with the fire hardening code that came out, I guess, around a year ago, maybe not quite, in which, we were originally looking at replacing more than 50% of our siding, but if we went over 50%, then some fire hardening code kicked in and would have required that we'd get some, different material and something that was, I don't think would have been compliant with the historic preservation code. And so the contractor kind of relayed to me that that's that it's currently just kind of a case-by-case thing, but it's very tedious and time-consuming to work through that every time. And it'd be nice to just have clear guidance on, or he suggested, just making the historic landmarks exempt from that fire hardening code because they're so few. It's a small percentage of the overall buildings in Louisville. But barring that, at least having just some clear guidance and not making it a case-by-case situation. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Yeah, thanks again for your time, and hopefully I'm highlighting some nuance to the historic preservation policies. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I do. I'm just trying to get this all straight in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When you bought it in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
right, shortly after the seller had the HSA completed, at that time, you and the seller knew there was a $5,000 grant that had never been taken advantage of, correct? And then, I thought earlier in your discussions now, you said that what you're spending is nothing on top or nothing that was also being spent by the previous owner. Was any money of the grant money taken by the previous owner?
Not that I know of. And I've checked with the previous planner, and they couldn't find anything.
You know,
No grant, but there was an incentive given to the past property
$1,000.
owner. Yeah, and that was $1,000. And they paid for the HSA as well, which was $900. The city paid for the HSA.
okay, that's what I want. I was just still trying to get this right. What it was, didn't spend.
Yeah, and shame on us for not researching it, but when we purchased the home, we were under the impression that we would be able to access grant money, not knowing that window had already closed. So it was a little disappointing to find that out after purchasing the house.
And for the siding, did you say you got windows also?
We did. Yeah.
Windows and porch. Did you go through an alteration certificate for that?
Yep.
So we looked at all that back at the time. And we did not approve money for that at that time. It was just that we approved of the work.
There was no request at that time. It was just for alteration certificates.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 3 different ones.
Okay. And that would have been in 2024 for the alteration certificate.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public on this property?
I do have a card from Gary Dunlap on
Okay.
this issue.
Thank you. And if you'll just state your name and city of residence, even though we already know.
I guess you do. I'm Gary Dunlap. I live in Louisville at 741 Lincoln. I'm a neighbor. I wanted to make a comment in support of some flexibility with the big costs that have landed on this house. The house is significant from a historic standpoint. There are 3 historic, of the 4 houses on this block, 3 are historic and all are landmarked. The house across the street is also landmarked. So it's an important place in Louisville. All of the other houses got some grant funding, including my own. But I've also lived on the other corner for 30 years. And so it was around as the historic preservation program came in. And the reality on the ground was that people didn't really know that what with this new program. A lot of people are really excited to do things to preserve old Louisville, to take their house and landmark it, to make it be part of that was going. And it really wasn't a matter of looking at the money. It wasn't a case where they say, oh, there's a new program, I should go hire an architect and a builder and find out what I can do and go ask for that incentive. That wasn't the reality. People landmarked this like that prior owner did, just for pride maybe, and because their participation in the history, maybe only their own history, but maybe families going back generations. They were really pleased to be part of the plan. So it's something that's kind of gone by the wayside, that the ability to get the support from the city on, houses just being landmarked because it's a good thing. It's difficult to do now. I was also around this house after, maybe earlier than when they bought it. The house was the siding was always bad. If you walked by the house at night, you could see the light coming through the walls. This was maybe 15 years ago. There was clearly no house wrap, probably no insulation, probably pretty cold at that point. So whoever got the initial landmark wasn't looking at doing any restoration. It just didn't happen. But that kind of makes sense too, because like Marty was saying, that's the way life goes on. You're not looking at, when you're buying a new house, at doing a big construction project and getting that going. So anyway, it sounds like the theme of tonight's meeting might be flexibility with the property on Main Street and this and your new proposals, which look really useful for grants going forward. So I thought I'd make a comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Any of our high schoolers have an opinion? All right. We'll bring it back for discussion with the panel. Yes.
I just wanted to add, there was a comment about the fire hardening code, and we do allow exemptions for historic structures from aspects of the fire hardening code, including siding. That is written into the fire hardening code already.
Okay, so that's already in place, an exemption. Yeah, thank you. All right. So this is where, if you want to open up the discussion with some of your thoughts.
I can talk about it now?
You can, you have permission.
So let's just go back to what I said the first time around. What I said the first time around, basically I'm just trying to think this through and look at how do we continue to promote and incentivize people to save the historic properties that we have, if they've been put into a situation where their hands may be tied because of costs, and the person prior to them who owned the property and did the landmarking process made that part happen but didn't take advantage of the money, and now after years go on, things get much more expensive. How can we do something to help these situations? I don't know. This is a question now. Do we have anything in place for a second grant request on a property that was already received one grant but not utilized on a landmark property? Can our new owner come back to us and say, this was approved, I know it's exceeded, it's timed out. Can I come back, and do we have any process at all that we can guide people towards in this situation? So anyways, open it up. Who else has thoughts on it?
Well, and if you, would you want to open it up in general, like or would you want to open it up to the requirements at that time? So like prior to the grant changes, would you if you were to open it up, would you stay with the same
No, I wouldn't.
grant
If-
time period?
If we're going to be more flexible and if we're going to look at opening things up to try to do what the heart of this program is trying to do, promote and incentivize, not put up roadblocks for people doing the things that we want to get done, then I would say the situation like this could be fairly well detailed, I think, as a exception where time has elapsed, the amount of money that was granted back in 2015, 2018, is not realistic at all for today's costs. It's not the new owner who is interested in doing what it can to preserve this home and doing it at the quality and cost necessary to make it actually last and not cheap it out and have it showing light through the siding again in 5 years. I can sympathize for that situation. So I would think if we're going to open up a landmark property that was approved for grants previously, that expired, a new potential buyer in a case had the new buyers investigated this prior to making the decision to buy or not, and we're told, no, you're not going to be able to get any additional money if this cost come in much higher than what they were at the time, and in fact, your time has expired, so forget it. I would like to be able to say, yes, we would look at it as an individual new application for grant assistance on a project that this committee has deemed as a property that we want to preserve.
And how would you, staff talked about just the continuing increases that we've had. So how would you handle the increases that we have as far as our general fund?
Right. You're saying to protect the ability of this to perpetuate,
Right.
and which I think is very important. And I agree with that. We have to have some way to budget and to continue to monetize this program. But if it's going to be looked at as a situation where they have an exception and we want to look at the potential of approving a grant in a situation like this, is that any different really than looking at a new application from the other guy down the street who hasn't had a property landmarked and HSA completed on it? I don't see that it's any different because right now, the project that we're talking about is dead in the water. There's no money available for it under those guidelines that were in existence according to the 2019 resolution. We as a committee know that there's been changes since then, and we're looking at major changes again because we know this is an evolving program and it's growing as the town sees these different situations. The situation with us, with our city buying the property on Main Street was amazing. It's turning out, it looks like it's going to turn out to be a great thing that instead of just incentivizing, we added the exact, well, if somebody else buys it, they get to use these incentives. So that probably helped, I'm sure, cement that deal. Without that, I have no idea the deal itself, but it might not have been as attractive. I would like to make the deals as attractive as possible, that how we can help to do what the city council states are the goals of preserving the property. So I would say look at it as like a brand new grant request, and even though they're not getting the landmark now, it's already fulfilled. You might need to do another HSA at that time just to make sure that anything that's been done before coming back, since in that meantime, we would want to verify what's been done and that it's still a property that is worth spending the tax dollars on to preserve.
Would you mind putting the slide that you had of the numbers up again? Thank you.
There's a couple things I see here. One is the property did have an HSA and what was purchased after the point. It was at least a known commodity going into the sale of the property. So I think you can't forget that portion. I'm not trying to be insensitive on any other front.
Josh, is your speaker?
It should be. Maybe I'm not close enough to it.
Us old men can't hear.
I'm not trying to be insensitive to things, and I do respect what you were saying because I think there's some valid strings that need to be pulled on a little bit there. My concern is, again, without having any historical or any research with this one on what we have out there as far as inventory and stock, you could be opening Pandora's box on this one. And regardless, I would say, even if you were able to backtrack on something like this, I feel like there would have to be some other item in there. I hesitate to say anchor, but something to hold it back to the point where you're not able to come in for the same grant fee funds that are available at this time. It just doesn't, we can't handle that as a group of having a whole group of people coming in and waiting it out as long as they can to hit it or whatever else on that front. And it might sound a little insensitive, but I think it's the truth with the way it's set up. Again, if there wasn't an HSA done at that point, it still seems a little bit backwards that we were doing HSAs after the fact a little bit, but I can respect that we were trying to give them as much information and provide them some ammo for what they're going to do. I mean, I see this as, at the time they were eligible for $5,000, kind of feels like that should, if we were even to say extraordinary circumstances or anything else with this, that almost feels like it should be the cap without some other portion to it. Now, in the future, if we had any other work plan, or I'm sorry, any other grant program resolution or something, maybe we could write an item in there that you could come back in, but you were never able to get more than 25% of what the current setup was, and that's only if you hadn't come in for funds before, or some other item that allowed it to lessen the impact, but still be somewhat realistic for freeing things up a little bit like you're talking about. Those are just some of my quick thoughts. I don't know if I really have an end point to it, but I just think that, again, it was gone into knowingly, and then also for me, coming in and asking for funds after the fact, there's a different level of how you look at stuff when they come in for the grant request of what they're doing, and to separate it out or understand, what windows and everything else were in there. It's a little bit deeper than I feel like I can get with the information that we have right now.
I feel pretty strongly that if the commission as a group feels like a property is deserving of being landmarked, then we need to do what we can and have some flexibility for cases like this. I applaud the homeowner for doing the work that they did. I looked at the house, the before photos, and the siding was a mess. I wouldn't consider this a maintenance project, but more so a preservation project. And we see this all the time with all the properties that come in front of us. We're offering grant money to replace siding and trim and clean up porch elements. This property owner took it a step further than what was recommended on the original HSA. And it sounds like it was well needed. That flexibility, I think, is critical to not keeping these properties from having anything further done to them. I feel like if anything comes out of this, we need to have a new resolution that maybe ties the grant to the property as opposed to the property owner. But maybe take a look at, I think this is extraordinary, not in the sense of allowing grants, but extraordinary 10 years after after being landmarked. That's why I asked the question, how many properties we might have out there that could be in the same situation. And that, I mean, that could go a long ways in this discussion. I know, how many properties do we have landmarked? 60 some? Could there be 10 out there that have never had any work done and could still be eligible for grants? Maybe so. I feel like our fund is pretty flush right now, especially knowing that our house on Main Street is under contract and we're going to have all that money back. But I think at the very least, I think we could discuss going back to what was allowed back in 2015, the $5,000 at a very minimum. I think it's just well-intentioned for what we're trying to achieve up here.
You would possibly be more open to keeping the cap based on when it was landmarked versus.
Or as Josh mentioned,
And with extraordinary maybe. Or,
So this is really great discussion. I think you're getting into the policy discussion, which is also on this agenda. So I would just really recommend that you focus on the 2019 resolution and the standards in that resolution. So, you know, we might change these standards and then they can come back in for grant requests. I just want to
we're operating under the current.
You have to operate under the current funding resolution, which is what, you know, that's the playing field that everybody's looking at. Now, you can find that there's extraordinary circumstances. I would recommend that you look at the extraordinary circumstances criteria, which talk about how there's unique features or size, or there's some condition of the property that has, and if we're looking at the resolution that we're going to be considering later, we did talk about people coming back in, and there was the idea that the direction that we got, again, this isn't policy, but that makes sense, especially for income qualified residents. So we want people to be able to maintain their properties. So if they're income qualified and they don't have the funds to maintain their properties in a historic manner, that's where we landed. It hasn't been adopted. But this is a policy discussion. So within the 2019 resolution, I would focus on if you think, you know, this structure had extraordinary, and it's compared to other like structures.
Right.
So does this structure have unique architectural features? Is it in a condition that is, you know, extraordinary compared to other structures? So again, I don't mean to cut off good debate about policy, but I would try to focus you back on the 2019 resolution. We can bring up the language in that resolution if that's helpful in your consideration, rather than kind of what you want the policy to be. You have to apply the policy as it's adopted.
Okay. So I'll take this back to you since you're still talking, the extraordinary circumstance. Do you feel like this would qualify for extraordinary? Just based on the 2019, staff explained it.
Do you have that definition or?
We can just pull up the whole. And anyone is welcome to chime in if you have a.
Because one of the questions I have about once he pulls up the language is whether the prominence of the location plays into the extraordinary circumstances.
I was going to get to that too.
I drive by that house all the time.
So landscape.
So the language that was adopted is that a showing of extraordinary circumstances relating to building size, condition, architectural details, or other unique condition compared to similar Louisville properties.
And I would say, compared to other similar style properties, it's a national folk. So there are a good many of these scattered throughout Louisville, but this one is on a main street that's driven frequently.
It's
by community
also
members.
very close to Louisville Elementary School's bus drop-off. So anybody who has kids that age is driving past it twice a day.
So I don't think it meets the criteria for other extraordinary circumstances. I think there's room for it to consider under that extraordinary circumstance simply because of its visibility. It is also, I don't think this necessarily fits the criteria of extraordinary circumstances, but it is noteworthy that the house did have the HSA done in 2018, if I'm getting the timeline correct, and sat for some time without any of that work being done. Again, highly visible to community members, and now is being done, and that is we're happy to see that. So that's not extraordinary circumstance, but you know, there's a lot of things to consider here with this.
Here we go again.
I know, like, that's not a protocol. What is staffing? Is that okay? We don't have any, that's fine. Staff, no, you can just come to the mic again and just state your name and city of residence, just for the record, since we're recorded.
Yeah, I don't
Is it
think that's
mic on? Is the green light on? Sorry.
Maybe pull it up.
There you go.
Crank it towards you a little bit.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, you just hit the button again, or you pulled it up.
Yeah, just touch it one more time. I think the green light went off.
You have to push the mic in, it probably came out of its. Can you?
Oh.
He is a little quiet, but I can hear him.
Can you hear Jess when she talks?
She was quiet tonight. I don't know if that's the mic.
Oh, sorry. Dan Weller, City of Residence, Louisville. Maybe not as quick a comment. I just wanted to I raised the issue with the porch earlier in my comments just because I think it started off as cosmetic, but I don't know the definitions of extraordinary circumstance, but it did seem more foundational when we opened it up and found that, some elements are supporting the roof and they're rotting and they need to be replaced. And also there are gaps in the foundation that also needed to be filled in. So I just wanted to highlight that and, in case that's helpful in consideration.
Can I ask you one question since you're up there? When you came for the alteration certificate, why didn't you do a grant request?
Because every conversation with staff at that point had been the window's closed, you're not eligible. Since then, I just happened to talk to Gary and some other people that were like, you could, apply at least,
Okay.
see what happens. So that's.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, if I could add one more thing. So the staff didn't emphasize this, but there is another eligibility issue with this one because the work's already completed. So the 2019 resolution does state that any work that's already completed, you can seek eligibility for those costs if you qualify for everything else, but it could only be used as a credit for future restoration, rehabilitation, and structural work. So the 2019 resolution also wouldn't allow a grant for work that's already completed. It only allows that to be counted as a credit towards future work.
Okay. Kind of like the matching, it would count towards
Towards, yeah, in fact, it says it counts towards a match
Okay.
towards future eligible work.
Okay.
So in addition to the, all the timelines that we've been talking about being inconsistent with the resolution, and even if there was a finding of extraordinary circumstances, there's this other issue in the 2019 resolution that only allows completed work to be used as a credit towards future work.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, so we're back for discussion again.
So it sounds like unless we find extraordinary circumstances, it's black and white based on the 2019 resolution.
Well, it sounds like staff also is saying that we should really stick to our resolution. I mean, that's like our legal binding document. And the flexibility could be if we decide that this is something we do want to pursue and have some flexibility, the applicant could come back and pursue it again if for some reason we were to change it. So, I mean, that's part of the, that could be a solution is there's no guarantee that we change anything or whatever, but I think definitely there is something to be said about probably having some parameters around this. If this is something that we want to say, it sounds like this is important to us. Like this is an issue worth exploring well and like actually figuring out like, do we hold them to the time period they're in? Do we have extraordinary circumstances? Do we say they can, that it's reimbursable or just a match? Or, I mean, there's a lot of questions. And so it sounds like it's probably worth actually doing the work and figuring out what we want to do well versus just doing this one time and then having discussion, and maybe it would work out better for the applicant after our discussion, or maybe before, I mean, like that whole thing. So that's kind of my thought, is like, let's stick to staff's recommendation of really following our 2019 guideline, have our discussion after this, and then going from there.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
If we were to say, yes, there's extraordinary circumstances due to the high visibility of the house, and approve $5,000 of matching funds for future work per what's written already, and then were to subsequently change, could they then come back?
Yeah, depending on how you word the new funding ordinance, they could potentially come back, depending on how that gets structured. Yep.
That would be my inclination.
It's a good compromise. I think I'm fine with the 5,000. I don't have an issue with the 5,000 by any means for me. And that's piddly compared to the work that's been done. So I mean, I think if that would be an option where they could at least have the 5, and I would even, I mean, I would even say not have it go towards future, but just
Granted.
granted. That'd be me. But
But it can't. It has to.
What would your basis be
I
for
know,
granting?
I don't know. So
I mean, I could see a basis being.
I know. So that's,
Well, could we not grant it based on that it is a extraordinary circumstance in that it's in a prime visible?
is prime visible part of our extraordinary circumstance? Is that
Depends
there?
on how you interpret it. I can read it again if you'd
I'm
like.
sorry,
It's
yeah,
not,
if
it's
you
not
don't-
explicitly called out.
It's kind of,
It's open to your interpretation, but it's definitely not explicitly called out in the criteria.
can you read it one more time, just to?
And I think that was one of the criteria looked at for the house at Main Street that we just landmarked.
Okay.
Okay, a showing of extraordinary circumstances relating to building size, condition, architectural details, or other unique condition compared to similar Louisville properties.
To me, the location piece is under that, under other unique, because that is what differentiates it from other like properties.
So under 2019, it would only be applied to future work.
But it's not nothing.
Not nothing.
I don't know if this affects it at all, but I'm trying to, excuse me, get clear in my head. Under the paperwork from this meeting, section 12, and I'm not sure, I was trying to figure out what resolution this is from. I'm reading section 12, time limits and procedures. Letter C, upon showing of good cause, the above timeline may be extended with approval of a subcommittee of the Historic Preservation Commission consisting of designated staff person and 2 randomly selected members of the commission. If the request for timeline extension is not approved unanimously from this committee, the request will be forwarded to the full commission for consideration at a public meeting.
That would be an extension.
I think that applies to this, that there should be a subcommittee that could look at it and say, we think they should be given more time to consider the grant request.
And is that for if the time is expired? Like, is that what that's in regards to?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is that if the timeline is expired, like the 18 months?
Yeah, does it have to be requested before it expires, or?
Yeah. Now we're getting back into some research here. Hang on. That was that.
While we look,
What section was that, Commissioner Will?
It was section 12, I believe. Yeah, section 12, time limits and procedures. To be considered for incentives funding, the owner must complete an application and submit it to the Community Development Department together with sufficient building plans, blah, blah. It goes into a very long, I don't need to read that whole thing right now. And then it goes down to letter C saying that can be extended with approval of a subcommittee. So section 12, letter C. Stumped me, that's for sure, when I was trying to figure all this out. And I think this goes to show that, I think Josh or someone asked the question of, shouldn't you know what you're getting into when you get into it and be held to that? It's like, holy hell, how do you know exactly what you're getting into? Because I've gone through the process twice personally, and I still don't know all these rules, and there's just a lot of stuff to.
Does staff have any recommendation on that?
I'm still trying to find the section.
Oh.
I don't know where it is yet.
Oh.
We're still looking for that language.
We could take it over to him.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the right
So,
pages here.
while we look, so I think there's a lot of intention here to assist the homeowner for now improving this property, to continue to make it habitable and to do all the historic preservation. I guess I'm not clear on how we would go about doing that because it would violate our 2018 statutes. And even if we find it extraordinary circumstances, there's no, it would also violate our funding abilities because we cannot go back and grant things. So I'm not clear on how we would do that. I think there's an intention to do that, but I don't know how we would do that.
Right. And that's what I was saying is if we have the possibility, I think it is probably a better solution to just cap this under the resolution of that time period and then move forward with possibly changing things if we think the flexibility is good for our program in the future.
Which would allow the applicant to return to the commission
Right.
with all of
This
this
is
in
the
mind.
new, so you're referencing the new resolution, not the 20.
I'm not sure if this is the new one or which.
This is the new resolution.
This is where we want to go.
This is not 20, this is not resolution
It's not gonna-
29.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's not going back to the resolution from 2019.
That's good.
Right.
Thank you.
right.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this? I know you already kind of stated your.
You know, again, I come back to if you were coming in for the grant in the first place, it would be looked at differently. I don't, there isn't enough information there. I feel like it's in the right direction and I don't feel like from what I can see, it was done improperly or outside of what we would possibly approve anyways. It looks like the siding exposure is still there and other items like that. I can respect all that. With that being said, I just don't know, and I don't feel comfortable for myself with the precedent of that one moving down that road. Now, could we look at something for the future updates? I think so, but for me, I empathize with where this is at. I respect that they've done the work, and I applaud it. I do. I think that we would have to go with right now would be that $5,000, and I think it would be a future credit, and I think that everybody could get behind that. And to be honest, I feel like that plays by the letter of the law at that time. And if we had anything else that we went through in future resolutions or updates or anything else, I would hate to say, hey, we're going to say this time we did $7,000 or some, other number. I'm just pulling a number out. And then, have it written into there that if you were already given something above the time when you came, like there could just be something else where we're trying to help and we're hurting, in my opinion. So
I think too, like from this point on, any work that's going to be done on a previous HSA is going to, like every year it gets more and more expensive. So that's also really hard. The grants were kind of made based on the time period of inflation. And so I think that's kind of a hard piece too, where, yeah, if you wait long enough, it gets really expensive too. And so that's just something we have to, that's a budgeting thing for our fund. So that's another piece.
and this is probably outside of everything that we're kind of talking about here, but again, I would have some sort of a limiting governor on somebody that came back in later on, because we can't have everybody come back in for the full force of whatever funds are out there every time it goes up. I just think you're opening it up too much. And so I think that there's a landing area in between the two when we do get to that discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that's something for us to debate, but I'm seeing it clearer now. 2019's rules are what we have to look at. Let's make our decision on that. The homeowner is here to hear what we're talking about and make our decision based on what we have to, with the knowledge that we want to dig into this and we want to make it as right as we can. It's too big of an issue and it's too complicated for us to, in an hour here, say, all right, here's a new rule. And so I would be in favor of basically what Josh was saying, is look at, we have an exception, $5,000 was what was allowed back in the 2019 grant, and approve that now. And then we're going to look at what can be done in the future for cases like this one or any others to come back.
Be a future credit?
Pardon me?
Are you saying it'd be a future credit?
That's what it has to be, right? Isn't that the way it was written in 2019?
Right, it has to be.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it would be a future credit, which is out there.
Something,
But,
yeah.
as you said,
That's all we can
it's not
do.
nothing, and it's showing some flexibility that we're going to try to figure out how to continue to grow with the new things we're learning as a committee, and have the possibility for additional help at some point. But no promises on anything, because we don't even know where we'll go as we get further into the details, and then from us to council, city council, to decide whether they think we're headed in the right direction or not. So.
Any other closing thoughts before someone makes a motion?
Sloan?
I agree regarding what everybody's just discussed, and I'm comfortable making a motion to approve $5,000 in future matching funds based on extraordinary circumstances around the prominence of the location of this particular property.
So one question I have too, if we approve the future matching fund, would the applicant, if we change something, would that change any of their future requests? Like, would that, basically they're done? Does that make sense?
We
I
don't
mean,
know. It depends on what we put in the next funding resolution.
Right. That's the other thing is like, are we, if we decide anything, are we setting it up for possibly being stuck?
It could be a handcuffed item. So my thought with it is, if you wanted to go about it and say that we were making a motion for the $5,000 for future matching funds because of extraordinary circumstances, you could also say the owner is able to decline it if they have not already actuated it, or something of that sort. I was just trying to find
a
a
solution to that.
Right.
So this is just the first step. You're a recommending body to city council. So city council would have to approve
Okay.
the grant as well. So the applicant could choose to wait until the new grant resolution is adopted.
Okay.
And then take your recommendation to city council subsequent, or they could withdraw that application and come back for a new application depending on what the new funding resolution says.
Okay.
There you
So
go.
they could make that decision. So our decision tonight is not binding,
Right.
basically. Okay. For the applicant or city council. Okay, so everyone remembers her. Okay.
Say it again.
I know. All right. So we have a
I'll
motion
second
on the
it.
table. And we'll do a roll call, please.
So what,
Oh.
so sorry, so there's a resolution
Oh,
that's in there, and so it has a blank for the amount. So I'd recommend that there's a motion that puts in the amount, plus that the motion includes that it's limited to future matching funds on eligible expenses. So if somebody wants
I
to,
said that.
oh, you did, I'm sorry, I didn't, there's, okay.
yeah.
So that's
Right.
included in the motion, that the resolution includes that language.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Beauchamp.
Yes.
All right. So thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for fleshing it out with us, and you can stick around if you want to see the next conversation.
Don't give up a ship.
All right, our next item is the grant program update, and this is a draft resolution presented by staff.
Okay, this is for the grant program update and the corresponding draft resolution. So just for context, for the background, updates to the grant program and incentives are a 2025 work plan item. So staff recommended a proposed approach for updating the grant program at the August 18th HPC meeting. HPC were in support of this approach and provided some feedback, which was incorporated into the new draft resolution, which was included in the packet. So the next few slides, I'll just go through a summary of the key changes. So the first large one was updating the grant limits for residential and commercial properties, including a new tiered funding approach. So these are the same amounts that were presented in the August staff report. So under these new amounts, a residential property could now be eligible for up to $136,000, not including exceptional circumstances, which is a new category for very unique properties. And residential property owners would also now be eligible for an additional structural match of $20,000. And then for commercial properties, a commercial property can now be eligible for up to $500,000, also not including exceptional circumstances. And I'll get into more details as well. As you might recall, we also have a cap proposed on both extraordinary circumstances for residential and commercial properties. So these are just the amounts for reference. Other key changes include, as I mentioned, a new residential structural grant for properties that require extra stabilization and foundation work. And we clarified in the resolution that this would have to be justified by an approved historic structure assessment. We also amended the extraordinary circumstances language to the following definition. And the intent was to consider extraordinary circumstances that preserved historic features of properties, such as windows, doors, and siding that would, without the fund, be cheaper to replace with new materials, and then maintained that you could use extraordinary circumstances towards vital structural work and code-related work of sensitive and limited systems that exceeded that Tier 1 base funding, if identified in an HSA. A new cap has been added to the extraordinary circumstances. So for residential properties, this is now $22,300, and for commercial properties, this is $80,000. So a cap did not exist before on extraordinary circumstances, as you know. A new exceptional circumstances category was added to provide flexibility for those rare cases that might exceed the proposed new caps. So these projects that qualify for exceptional circumstances must meet all of the following criteria. So demonstrate exceptional architectural style or social history contributing to the historic fabric of Louisville, demonstrate exceptional uniqueness in the city, and HP funds must be available after taking into consideration other priorities and obligations, including encumbered funds. to address income and equity considerations, an income qualifier for households that are at or 120% below area median income was added. And so these property owners that qualify for this income qualification could access grants and loans for maintenance purposes. And they could also request a cash match waiver of up to 50% for matching grant types. The revolving loan program has continued with no changes. And as discussed at the August meeting regarding the contingency emergency reserve fund, this will be set in the new resolution to 25% of the previous year's sales tax so that we don't have to set it every year. And then, as written, the draft resolution maintains the deadline for requesting grants 36 months after landmarking and 60 months for reimbursement requests. And then, just as a note, one public comment was received, and they requested that this be added to the packet. It was an email comment from DAJ Design. So the staff recommendation is that the HPC approve Resolution 12, which is recommending to City Council adoption of the proposed resolution updating the Historic Preservation Fund incentives. And the earliest that this resolution could be taken to City Council is December 16th. So that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions or want to discuss.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I mean, my question is just to clarify the portion that you brought up about asking for extensions. That's included in this somewhere. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
In the guts of it?
That we can, you mean?
Yes, is that what, yes, this link.
Right, but it does address that.
Right, I just want clarity on what this really means in the context of the preceding conversation we just
So
had.
currently it's the same criteria as our 2019 resolution. So it would be the deadline for requesting a grant. It would be 36 months from the date of landmarking.
Right,
Was that
so
the
then
question?
where was that language about requesting an extension
So
coming from?
it's section 12C, paragraph C. It says, upon a showing of good cause, the above timeline may be extended with approval of a subcommittee of the Historic Preservation Commission consisting of a designated staff person and 2 randomly selected members of the commission. If the request for timeline extension is not approved unanimously, the request will be forwarded to the full commission for consideration at a public meeting.
So are there any parameters on those requests? Like if it has already lapsed, can you go back and ask for that?
Just says a showing a good cause is your,
At any point in time?
it's not limited in time to extend the approval, I don't believe.
And it doesn't say anything that I could find of that it has to be by the original recipient of the.
Yeah, we've never limited any of this. This runs with the land. It's never been limited to the original recipient. So it always runs all of these, even the 36 months timeline runs with the land. If they sell it within those 36 months, the new owners can take advantage of the grants. So I think, the showing of good cause is if that's the criteria. Yeah, if that's so that's pretty wide open. And so it's always nice to have a lot of flexibility, but if you want strict parameters, we would want to further explore language around that in this resolution, because it really depends on how open-ended the city is comfortable letting people come back, how many years, how much money. I think staff's opinion, as I think is that there should be limits, and there's probably good reasons for limits. So if you want to have criteria for extending limits or just keep it open, because, also, there could be people who spend a lot of money. They're not income like the one thing that we put in there was the income qualified, because in the last discussion we said, over time, a lot of people can afford to maintain their historic homes. Most people can afford to maintain their historic homes, and they have to maintain it to historic standard. That's built into having a landmarked home. Mm-hmm. They still get their zoning incentives, right? There's still other incentives that don't expire ever. But if we want to allow people to come back without income qualification, because they don't demonstrate they need the money to maintain the home, then I think we want to have maybe better criteria than good cause. I think prior to tonight's discussion, I would have thought good cause was probably adequate. I would definitely recommend we further flush out that language.
Yeah, my instinct based on the conversation that we just had was that we need to actually talk about it before we can make a recommendation on that.
And, you know, the good news, since we can't take this to city council till December, is, you know, we can come back with amendments based on tonight's discussion, and you can have further, I believe that would work, because this may be more than a one-meeting discussion. But also, too, just to not get totally distracted on this item, I don't know if you want to, you know, you might want to go through the other things first and maybe try to bring this up after kind of seeing if you're supportive of the rest of the resolution, and then maybe we can come back to this item.
That's a good idea. Yeah, we can come back to it. I was just going to point out 3 things that kind of stand out in our discussion to come back to, though. So if one thing is the HSA should be done if we have a landmark, right? So we'll already have that.
Right.
His HSA, which is in our favor. I would kind of think maybe we don't allow reimbursements. Like, it has to be something that we can review and all that kind of stuff. Like, doesn't that kind of, that's something to talk about. And then only
Wait,
up,
could you, I didn't follow what you just said.
so like the reimbursement, like, versus paying for work, like,
If you're going to ask for an extension.
right, if you're
In
asking.
the context of asking.
Right, if you're
for
asking for an
it.
extension, it's not, can I have
For
an
work
extension
already.
because I already did this work? But it's more of like, can I have extension, I have work I need to do based on my HSA. And then the final thing that I, off the top of my head, was really sticking to the previous limits and not doing as much extraordinary circumstance. And that should be shown in the HSA as well. So those are ththings we can come back to, but I just kind of want to throw those out. Okay, so we'll go back to the overarching
Everything else.
everything else. Just because we've already gone through this pretty in-depth last time. So it's more of just making sure that everything is like we talked about and that we're all in agreement before we send it off to city council. So. Can we put the corresponding slide up again? If there was a straightforward, yeah, just any of those are great.
Was it the tables or which one?
Yeah, the table, we'll just start on the residential first.
Okay.
That's great, thank you. So some of the big differences, we're breaking it up into tiers, which isolates that extraordinary circumstance and gives us a cap on the extraordinary circumstance. Does everyone still feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
And then breaking it into exceptional. So. And everyone's still good with the actual dollar amounts for each item?
Yeah, I did find it funny that the HSA was $900 for that last one.
Mm-hmm. Back in the day. Yeah.
And the max was 5,000 for residential grant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think greater definition of everything does help, because otherwise it's just what is it and how big of a box is Pandora's box of extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
That sort of stuff. So I can support that.
Right. And that's within 6 years, right? Like that's changed this much. So I think it is a good timing for us to really nail this down a little more clearly. Because it could get real out of control.
Yep.
Okay. Anything on residential, and we'll turn it to commercial. So same tiers.
Did we discuss how frequent we're going to be reviewing these numbers?
And I think it's fairly subjective as far as just
Yeah, there's not a specific timeline on it. We talked about like having an inflationary factor, and we thought there was some benefit to, having a grant program in place for a certain amount of time, because that adds to the incentive for people to come in. I think when we start doing these resolutions, people stop coming in, or they wait for the next year to roll over for there's all these anti-incentives. We're up in 3 years. We don't know if the tax will be renewed. So I think we had talked at the last study session that that'd be a good time. So assuming the tax gets renewed, then we'd probably want to come back and look at the funding resolution again. So it's probably like 3 or 4 years away.
Sounds good.
And by subjective, I don't mean like whatever we feel like, but it's more of like when we can tell that it's not working as well. That's what I mean by subjective. We have plenty of informational backing.
And I could see like the 3-year setup because of when the funding is, or the tax portion is good through, but it seems like it should be a longer period to me for review. I don't know, 5 years or something of that sort. Again, so you're not always ending up with this, we're a year into it, year and a half into it, let's just wait for the next one because there'll be more. I think if you just move the goalpost a little bit and not get bogged down in always revisiting these, I think it'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, I can see benefit to that for sure. Because 3 years is not very long.
I think the numbers look good. We've looked at these, talked pretty in depth about them previously. The commercial also flushes out.
I still liked them. I think going through the process fairly recently that these numbers are good, realistic numbers to work with.
That's helpful. Yeah. Okay.
One thing I have a question of clarification for myself. In our resolution, section 7, we've got 5 things to qualify work for grant and loan programs, and the last one is maintenance. And we've talked a few times tonight, and I keep hearing people say it's not for maintenance, but section 7D is maintenance, is the act or process of maintaining or preserving the form, features, and characters of a property as existing at the time of the work to maintain its historic character and condition. Approved work is limited to the exterior work. So I don't know if I'm not reading this right, but I think this is saying that the grants are to be used for maintenance work on exterior.
Right. So most grants wouldn't qualify for that. We put that in there specifically for that concept that we came up to allow income qualified residents to be able to use the grant funds to maintain their homes over time. And I don't think there's no expiration on that. So that's where someone who's income qualified has a historic home, can't afford to keep it up, that we would provide some funds for that.
Was that specific to the loan? Is that what you said? Was there a loan?
It's section 7 is qualifying work for grant and loan programs.
Grants
I
and
don't know,
loans.
was that specific, that letter D, was that specific to the loan?
No.
Because you're saying it's for people who qualify because of.
For the grants. It's
the
kind of a
grant.
definition to apply to the income qualified maintenance grant program that's in there.
Okay. Yeah. So that would be an exception for those who can't afford just general maintenance on a historic home.
But it doesn't say that in our resolution, right? That it's
It
an
does
exception.
say that. You just kind of have to connect the dots later. It's basically serving as a definition. So once you get down to the income qualified grant program, then we know what we mean by maintenance. We're not defining it in that section. We're defining it here.
It's like a glossary.
That,
It's like, it's defining the terms, and the only time that that term comes up is under the income qualified grant. That makes sense.
Okay. I hear what you were saying, but it sounded like it's going to be very hard for a layperson to read this and say, well, maintenance is qualifying for grants. Well, no, not unless you can't afford it. Then it is. It's to me, setting up a lot of question of is it or is it not acceptable? And why is it only acceptable if you can't afford to do it on your own?
I think we do have staff able to advise people on that they have a better connection with it. So it's not like because I get it. You blindly come into a code like this and you're going, wow, where do I even start? But I think that's why we have somebody else that's able to help lead you through it a little bit. And as far as I understand, it's pretty easy to get in and have this discussion. So.
And I think it's just the format of how code is set out. I think it's a common format.
Okay.
So it's not.
Yeah, and I didn't even, honestly, it was a lot of papers to go through in a weekend.
Right.
So I pulled the most important things that were jumping out at me, and I'm not sure if I'm taking it kind of out of context when I'm looking at this.
No, it's not unwelcomed. It's good that you're fine-comb tooth coming in.
Fine-tooth comb. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Did everyone have a chance to read the extraordinary circumstance? We all are good with that? Okay. Any other changes or questions or?
No, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of good stuff. One little minutia thing, when you look at it, on the last page of it, there is a paragraph that I think is just a word error. Whereas increasing incentives for historic preservation will promote and strengthen another core value of the city's comprehensive plan, which is to promote of unique commercial areas and distinctive neighborhoods. I think there might just be, maybe that was
Extra words.
the word of is not right. Maybe it's supposed to be are. So maybe just look at that paragraph.
Okay, so it looks like our limits and general understanding of what's changing is good.
Yes.
And so if we, want, would this be a good time to go back to that, with the previous discussion, or do we want to?
I think it would be good to look at the exceptional circumstances criteria and make sure you are comfortable with that.
So again, it's somewhat open to interpretation as far as exceptional, what's exceptional.
Right.
So that would just be a discussion amongst us to determine what we all feel is exceptional at that time.
Yeah, I think the exceptional uniqueness phrase is where it's more open to interpretation. I think this commission, while we are asking for parameters and want parameters for obvious reasons, we also somewhat like the flexibility because cases come up that we really hadn't considered. So,
Like examples could be really like the church, like one of the church properties we had talked about at the last time, or the grain elevator property, or like a unique, this might apply to commercial properties, or maybe like really unique residential properties. That's the intent of this. How it gets interpreted 5 years from now, we don't know.
Exactly.
But the intent is these are like one of a kind in the city.
Right.
So they're unlimited, and you just need the funds in order to be able to preserve them.
Right. And I think that's what's different from just the extraordinary, and what we probably had such a hard time with was that we're like, well, this is just a tiny home that doesn't really have any distinguishing, but it does have really big issues. So I think that just the architectural style, social history, like that piece of it, like we can all kind of in our minds identify some example properties that make that more distinguished, where it's not as like wishy-washy. So I think that helps a lot.
and I think that first phrase somewhat limits the second phrase. So while we certainly can imagine there'll be situations that come up that we might want to apply to the second phrase, the exceptional uniqueness, by defaulting back to the first one, that's where it anchors it.
Right.
Question. So again, assuming, this is supposed to be an incentive to fill a gap in the cost to make a project financially feasible, that could be something that we didn't contemplate here, and I'm just thinking about how that could help you. That, somebody can come in and ask for $3 million, and do they need the $3 million to make it a financially? So if you want to add, an applicant who's asking for exceptional circumstances, which is unlimited funds, that they have to demonstrate that those funds are necessary. We do this a lot in the financial analysis when people are asking for like urban renewal grants, is where I'm getting the idea, is that an applicant has to demonstrate that there's a gap in funding to make a project feasible. So that's something that we could contemplate adding as a criteria, just so you're not, because you don't know, right? And then the applicant we could put that burden on the applicant to show that without these funds, we couldn't do this project. I think it's assumed with all of our grants, or it's supposed to be assumed with all of our grants, that this is just filling in a gap so that somebody doesn't tear it down. Mm-hmm. So that might be something that I think we hadn't contemplated. We could add that, and I don't know if you'll pass this tonight or if we'll come back in November, but we could play around with the language on that if you like that idea.
I like the idea of that.
I like that
financial burden.
I like that idea, but if it's assumed in all of our grants but not stated, then perhaps it needs to be stated explicitly.
I think it would be worth stating here just because it's the unlimited fund. Right. And so it's harder to know where to draw the line. I mean, we could put it in everything or put it in nothing, but here it might make some sense just because of that.
I feel like you could be waiting for the other shoe to drop as soon as this thing goes live, of somebody coming in and saying, I need it all.
Yeah, well, you can do that now. Under our extraordinary circumstances, there's no cap on our extraordinary.
Right.
And I think that's the hardest, one of the hardest things for this commission to know when somebody's at, because all these properties are old, they all have problems, they all need, it's expensive to maintain old homes.
Right.
So it's really hard to know where to draw the line. That's why we put the gaps, or that's why we put the caps on, and then we have the criteria so you can take it on a case-by-case basis above the cap. But those should be unusual, they shouldn't be the norm, is what we're trying to achieve with the standards.
And so is gap in funding relative to their personal financial ability?
So I would say a demonstrated gap, and so oftentimes these will be investment properties or commercial properties. I think we could play around with the language so to say like there's a gap in, like the applicant demonstrates that there's a gap in funding, or without these funds the project won't be financially feasible. So that the applicant has to demonstrate that. On a commercial property, they typically provide us a pro forma analysis of the project. And so we could say, yes, there needs to be a reasonable rate of return, and we could look at all the financials. On a residential project, it would be a little more difficult to know, because if you're a homeowner, it wouldn't apply. I think we could make it as a optional standard that you could consider, but you don't have to consider it in every case as well.
But probably for commercial, it would make sense to put it in regardless.
And you could even just limit it to commercial, say for commercial projects, demonstration that there's a gap in funding. For residential, you could say something similar and just say that there's a demonstration that there's a financial need in order for that without the funding, the project wouldn't be viable. I don't know, we could play around with if you like the idea, we can play around with the language and come back in November with some options.
And I guess I'm also thinking because our previous, what's our max for the residential right now? It's like 120 or something with the.
136.
And that's with the extraordinary?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably more than most of our, have we given a grant for more than that at this point? Extraordinary.
Yes.
We have more than extraordinary?
For residential, I think so. Yeah, so that was kind of an average. We kind of got that as an average.
So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to do a gap in funding. not gap funding, like it says. But yeah,
You said you don't think it's a bad
I don't
idea
think it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea.
to have to prove
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't think there's any harm in that,
I
especially
think it's
because we already
reasonable.
have the extraordinary. And then for the tier 3, just to make it a true, like, third, very distinguished, exceptional situation, I think that's fine to show, like, there's financial need and it's a larger than average.
And I do think it is something that you could come up with. It's always gray numbers, things change, but on a residential property as well as in a commercial project, you can come up with comps of the market value of a property in this neighborhood of this style of home, could come up with something to show that, all right, unless this whole project can be done for $1 million, I can't do it because market value on these homes right now is $1 million and up. And so it is something that is feasible for residential to do as well as.
Yeah. So, so it sounds like unanimously, pretty much,
Yes.
we're saying that.
Yeah.
So that would mean that we would continue the official passing of it until November. Is there anything else? Let's see. Is there another slide that we need to look at? Oh, this is the income qualifier. The loan would stay the same. And then the reserve fund, which is something is new to reserve that. And then last one would be maintain the deadline for the 36 months and reimbursement. So we do allow a reimbursement for 60 months.
Just to clarify, you'd have to request that amount of money, but you'd have 3 years then to actually do the work.
5.
60 months.
Is the 60 months, I think, is from when you get your grant approved, correct?
So
Or is it 60 months from landmarking? Yeah, so if
the difference between the 36 and the 60, so it's 2 years, not 3. I did the math wrong in my head. But
oh, no, but I think you get 5 years. So if you get your grant approved,
you have to request the grant within 36 months, and then you have another two years
5 years
That's
to get
8 years
reimbursement.
to do it all.
on top of it.
Is that how it's written?
Oh,
That's
once it's
that's what
approved.
They have 60 months from getting your grant approved. So you can wait 3 years to get your grant approved and then have another 5 years to
5
complete the
to
construction. So there's really an 8-year time frame from the time you're landmarked
Yeah.
to win. So this is, I mean, when you're thinking about how to manage the funds, if we encumber the funds and we assume they're going to do the work, it's a pretty generous time frame. Like usually people don't take that long to build once they've got the grant and put their plans together. So if they don't, that's just an issue with, we assume they're going to spend that money, so we don't, that money at some point, right, whether it's 3 years, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, like this fund is going to not be like it is now, right? And we're going to have to manage it differently. So we're going to have to know how much of the funds are encumbered. And that could be years out before it's actually spent. People may not spend that money. So there might be a time where we're having limited funds, and if people aren't spending those funds, we want to know that so that we can use it on other things, if that makes sense. So that's part of why we want to have some time limits.
Right.
Do we ever warn people that they haven't spent the money and that they're about to expire?
I don't think we've ever had any, we don't actively do that. But I think most people that get a grant, they either start the project or they don't. And once they've started the project, I don't think we've ever run into this time frame where they come in like after that second expiration date, and they're like, oh, you can't get your money. Because I don't think anybody takes that long to actually get their project done.
I'm just
you're
thinking
saying
in the
before we
context of the
started.
conversation that we had earlier tonight as a way to avoid scenarios like that. Say, well, we,
Like if someone were to landmark and then not do a grant in that 3 years
right, like that maybe we give them like a 6-month
warning.
warning, not a warning. but
Yeah, I
like-
mean, we could, I think that could be an administrative thing where we warn folks, but again, this was so long ago, even if we had given a warning and then the property changed
I
hands.
know,
it
we're
was-
thinking like forward,
Just a
like
cour-
what could
courtesy.
we learn
Yeah.
from?
Yeah, that could be a courtesy thing, but.
So any changes or issues about this? Does everyone feel like the timeline is pretty adequate?
Yeah.
I
So
think when you break it down like that, like 8 years is quite a bit of time. Especially because you're wanting to get it done before it gets more expensive.
So help me understand, the case that we were looking at earlier tonight, if we adopt this resolution, it still wouldn't qualify at all because it's too far past this. So we're not going, in this resolution, we're not doing anything to help
No, we have to create something new. We
something
have a
new,
table for
totally
the end
different,
of this
yeah,
conversation.
after this.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's, I needed that help. Thank you.
All right. So that all looks good.
Yeah.
Is that the end of it?
That's the end.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So do we want to, should we adopt this and then talk about the other thing? Or is that going to be part of it?
Yeah, we're going to come back with at least the one amendment on the
Great, so we don't have to worry
criteria.
about that. Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah, so right now we have,
The other thing.
section 12C that I think you want to talk about. So 12C, if you want to bring that up,
Okay.
that's where it says upon a showing a good cause, the timeline can be extended.
Okay.
So that's where you may want to recommend some changes.
Okay. So we will now officially be talking about section 12C, which has to do with the extension of grant requests.
What did I get
Already
myself into?
expired. It's good though.
I mean, I think what we had started talking about was the definition of good cause. Are there parameters that we want to create?
What would you say?
I don't know. Other than the fact that I do think it's probably, that feels very vague in light of the conversations that we've had tonight.
Well, I would say good cause though is, I mean, like if there's things that need to be done and you don't have a grant, you're getting it done. You know, like you have best intentions for your property.
No, but if you're asking,
Oh,
so
why
like the
you need it.
subcommittee needs to base
Oh,
a decision
gotcha.
on some parameters. Or then if it gets kicked up, yeah.
I think regardless, if you've gone beyond what was the code of that time, it always has to come to full committee. Like there's no subcommittee portion of it.
We're proposing that it could be approved by a subcommittee. So if you don't want it to grant the authority to the subcommittee, we would amend that out of the proposed resolution.
So if you're asking for an extension, you're asking for an extension of the original terms under which the landmarking
No, it actually
occurred,
doesn't
or-
specify that. We would need to expand this. You're a very good point. Yeah, this is just an expansion of if you qualify under this resolution. So that actually wouldn't apply to people who landmarked under old resolutions. So I guess that's the first question. I assume you want to create a provision for people who landmarked under previous resolutions. You want to allow them to come back and ask for funding.
If we want to let them ask for an extension, and if they can ask for an extension,
so, yeah.
are they asking for different parameters?
Yeah, so here's an idea, right? If somebody gets, oh, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No,
Please.
Go.
So here's some food for thought, right? So we've got a 36-month time frame in our current resolution. So if somebody's coming up to the end of that 36 months and they need more time because something's come up. So we could try to create some language. Now, that's not going to address what happened here tonight, because that was 10 years ago, and they expired 10 years ago. So, but if you see someone who says, oh, like, I just haven't gotten my construction plans together, you may want to say, if you're coming up against your time frame, you can come and ask because, you know, something's come up, you've run out of money, there's been some issue, and I think that's what we meant by good cause here, is like,
Yeah, that
something's
makes
gotten
total
in the
sense.
way,
Right.
but this isn't meant to be completely open-ended and allow a 10-year extension.
Right.
So I think we'd want to go to the language that says that you have to go back to the resolution at the time, and I'm not sure what section number that is. We could look that up, and we could put language in there that says that, however, you can come back to we probably have the extraordinary circumstance. Do you know what section that was? I could
In
look
the new
that.
resolution?
The new resolution?
I
Yeah.
don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. So there's a new section that mimics the current 2019 that basically says that you're under your old resolution. But we probably want to add language to that. And do you want to allow people, I guess my first question is, do you want to allow it open-ended with no time limits?
Two things. One, if somebody came in and they were within their 36 months and they're in the current setup, I have no problem that going to subcommittee and saying, we need more time. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's a good cause, easy question, yeah.
Mine was if you were of a previous code, there's no way that does not come in front of the whole board.
Right, I
agree
agree.
with that.
And I agree with the good cause phrasing here. I think that's fine within those parameters and in a subcommittee.
But I think
And then how long is the extension for?
that would be my next question.
But I would think it would be,
Okay. So we have the
think you could-
exact same language, I think, from the 2019 resolution. It's in subsection E. So if you were under a previous resolution, you have access to the grant funds available through the resolution in effect at that time of the landmarking approval. Those owners may apply for additional grants through the extraordinary circumstances process. So it would come back to the whole commission under the current language. It's just the extraordinary circumstances language is changing. The criteria are changing. So you might want to, when do you want to allow it and when don't you want to allow someone to come back?
and so you were saying if they were to come back, like if it was a new owner and they came back, that would be extraordinary circumstance?
No,
Is
I'm
that
not
what you said?
suggesting that at all. I'm saying
Oh, I was
it
like,
doesn't matter
no.
if it's, doesn't matter if it's a new
Okay,
owner or the
okay.
same owner. I wouldn't recommend you make a distinction about who owns it.
No.
I'm just saying, all it says is that you can return to the commission to ask for additional funding through the extraordinary circumstances process. So you're using that criteria.
During the term that's allowed without an extension.
So this is for people who landmarked under old resolutions.
Right, so they have whatever time
They have their
to come
36
back
months.
to ask for more money is within.
There's no time limit on it right now.
Forever.
Forever, they can come back and ask. Just like, we had this evening, they can come back 10 years later and ask. So if you don't want time limits, we can not have time limits, or you could put a time limit. And then we probably want to talk about what criteria you want to consider when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate.
Just to clarify, so they can come back for an ever and ever to ask for extraordinary circumstances under the terms of the grant limits that were in place at the time they originally got approved? Or just
No, I think
infinite?
it's under the extraordinary circumstances, under the new resolution is how I would interpret it.
Is how it was written before or how it's written now? Is this 2019 that
Both.
we're talking about?
Are you looking at E?
Sorry, let me try. So I think under, the way it's written now is that they would have to apply for extraordinary circumstances under the criteria of extraordinary circumstances in
At
the
the
new in the new resolution is how, clearly we need to define that
Yeah.
here. So we need to, whatever you decide, we'll say, do you want them to be under the old extraordinary circumstances or the new? And then we'll state it in here. But what I guess what I'm getting at too is I don't think you want to use extraordinary circumstances.
Right, that's what I was thinking, was then it seems.
So it doesn't matter.
Counter to what we're trying to
Right,
accomplish.
right, that's why I was like, you keep saying extraordinary circumstances, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Can I ask a question? How many revisions have we had since, let's use tonight's example? How many times have we changed or updated the amounts and code since that one came through and was landmarked in 15?
I think we're on, this would be our third.
Sounds right.
This will be our third funding resolution. So we had that $5,000 residential grant, that was on the books kind of from the beginning. We had something before that, but we didn't have a clear funding resolution. So that was our very first funding resolution, was the 5,000. Then we did the 2019 update, and here we are with the new update.
Okay.
This would be our third.
So really, this would be the second one since that one was in place.
Right.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, again, without having some sort of analysis from you guys of how many are out there, what sort of Pandora's box we're opening, it's really hard to get into this and dig deep enough, in my opinion. So I don't know if that's something we could request or even should.
We could look that up. There's also, it doesn't say anything about here about whether you received grant funds before. That could be a criteria. You could say, well, if you've never received grant funds, then maybe you can come back.
I kind of wonder if we could put, again, I'm just thinking out loud for 2 seconds here. It does seem a little bit unfair if somebody did come in and get $5,000 at that first point or whatever it was, and then this thing progresses, and even we get, 3 years from now, it jumps again by another 15% or whatever else, that they're stuck in this realm. But I'm wondering if it almost drags like a code section behind or something of that sort, or if there's a percentage of the current that they cannot exceed 25% of current funds, whatever you're under right now. There seems to have to be some other governor or limiting factor for me, just because otherwise we could really open this up.
Just think out loud too.
Yeah.
How does that differ from the guy next door coming in with a grant request? He's not gonna, because your property's next to that one that was landmarked way back in previous resolutions, and it's gonna be held to that standard, and your neighbor next door is given triple the amount to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, because we recognize that as a valid amount. But you, because the previous person did this a long time ago and it was a trendsetter for the neighborhood,
right?
Maybe that trendsetter is the one who convinced other people to do it,
No,
So it's, in my mind, I'd love to see a flood of HSAs being done and seeing requests come in. And then we look at them and say, we have it in here. I forget what the wording that you've put in, but I liked it. It was that it's all dependent on what funds are available, what we see coming down the pipeline at that time. We can only judge our decisions based on what we know. We can't sit here and go, well, next year we might get 5. So we don't want to give you money now that here's the known. We know that you're coming in, Josh, with a request that's very reasonable for today. Your property was landmarked previously. They didn't take grant money. We want to try to work with you to help you to preserve this property. So I think it should just be looked at as any other new applicant.
I think every time you get increases, somebody's gonna be back in here, or something of that sort is kind of how I just feel like.
But that's okay if they didn't use it, right? So it wasn't used, there was no grant money given.
Would you do it on the current grant?
I'm sorry?
Would you give the grant based on the current grant amounts or based on
what originally
their
approved
original
for them?
grant was? Timeline.
On the new.
You would give
Because I would look at it as a brand new application. Just say, it's been landmarked. Cool. That when that was done, it also received an opportunity for a grant for $5,000, which wasn't taken. Your property is still landmarked. It still needs attention. And you're willing and able and want to do it, and you want help with it.
Can I ask you a question about what is so it started at $5,000 in the very beginning. What is the difference between $5,000, like inflation adjusted, versus how much we've learned from the program and changed?
Yeah, so I mean, we're way above inflation, I'm sure. So I do think that it's also not just what does it cost to fix a home. Again, I pulled up the municipal code, and I think this is actually in the funding ballot measure, is that this has, like, these funds are supposed to be limited to incentives, preservation incentives. And I know you can interpret what an incentive is, but we've always interpreted it that this is an incentive to landmark. It's not a home maintenance program for people who have landmarked. And so I think our maintenance for the income is stretching that limit. And so I think that's where staff's coming from. So it also has to do with how much money's in the fund. So back in 2015, we didn't have that much money in the fund, but it was effective. We did get people to come in and landmark for the $5,000. The program's evolved and expectations have evolved over time. But again, I just want to emphasize that we aren't trying to find the purpose of these funds aren't to allow people to maintain their historic homes over time, no matter how much we want to help them maintain them. It's to incentivize them to landmark in the first place.
And that's where I was headed with this in the beginning. My first thoughts were what I hear on the street all the time when I talk to people about being on this committee, and people kind of going, whoa, we're not going to do that. If we landmark it, we're screwed. We can't resell the property.
Right.
And I want to get rid of that stigma. I want to figure out how we can be fair and be good stewards of the tax dollars that we're working with, but also address a very real concern. There's, if anybody does have any kind of concern about the investment side of what they're doing and the future value of the property, right now, there's a lot of people who look at it as a negative, not as a positive.
So I just want to add a little bit of color to that too, because there's a lot of research out there that historic homes don't, like, people think the home loses value, but that usually isn't the case. So by landmarking your home or being in a historic district, you actually often increase the value of the home. And I know people may think otherwise, but that doesn't make it true. And then if you landmark, you also get significant zoning incentives, which I don't want to lose track of. So you get more lot coverage. That adds significant value to the home above all of your neighbors, just adding that additional square footage.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't think it's true. I think that's a communications issue to solve.
Education and outreach issue.
It's a communications and outreach issue more than a reality of that. When you landmark your home, it loses value. I just don't think, I think we could do some research to see what landmark homes have sold for compared to other homes and bring that back at the next meeting just to further demonstrate that, but that isn't the common knowledge in historic preservation.
Well, and I think one of the hangups is the new owner transfer of the grant. I think that was really what the issue was tonight to some extent,
But it goes, you said it goes with the.
All grants run with the land to the new owners.
right, it goes to the new landowner, but the grant had already expired from 2015.
Yeah.
So the grant could go to the new owner, but it had already expired, so then it didn't go to the, right? So that's that funny part.
Right.
And then obviously they waited
that's already in there,
longer.
so that's already dealt with.
Yeah,
right?
but I think
we're
that
not
could
having
be-
to change that.
I think that could be good cause too, right? If you're to me, it's all about the time frame.
Right.
Like if you've got a 36-month and you're selling around that 36-month time frame and a new owner comes in and they're in like 6 months or a year after the expiration, that seems more reasonable than somebody coming in 10 years after the grant expiration. They had no expectation of getting the grant. They just, here's a potential way to have somebody pay for a big chunk of my project, half of my project.
Right.
Because we're landmarked. There wasn't a need for the money as an incentive to get it landmarked.
Right.
So I think that's always been how we've operated the incentive program and why we've always had limits on the amounts and the timeframes.
Right.
When we had $5,000, there was a time we didn't have time limits, I don't think. But that was probably long ago, so.
Well, and I just wonder, and this doesn't really apply to tonight's situation, but it could, to some extent, incentivize as far as, because there could be property owners that don't have large, like they got it landmarked, they have their HSA, but there's nothing that's like super duper like necessary right away. Or maybe they want to sell it, but they don't want anyone to be able to tear it down. So like, I'm going to landmark it and then sell it in the next 3 years, but my grant will expire. But we could just guarantee that if they don't use the grant, that the new owner, that grant would start like when the new
Bingo.
owner starts. So if you haven't used the grant amount, when you transfer the ownership, it would go with the property, and you would have 3 years from that point. So at least everyone.
The option to request an extension.
An extension, right? Because then you would have, the new owner would have the HSA, which our owner did, and they would know like, are these things that we need to get done? Can we pay for these ourselves in 3 years, or should we go ahead and get this started? Like that whole thing. So that could be, kind of take out some of that ownership limitations of, I want a landmark, but.
Does it matter when they sell it in this scenario? If they sell it 6 or 8 years after landmarking, then would they, because right now the owner, they expire after 36 months, but let's say that's 3 years. Let's say they sell it 8 years later. Does that spark a new grant?
I would say it would still go under the grant amounts that they landmarked under.
So we would really have to start encumbering every landmarked property, whether they ask for grants or not. We
I
couldn't.
don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
It just.
my thinking is back to what I said earlier about giving people fair warning is a way to help some of this without making it like crazy and like forever and ever. People can keep coming back and asking for stuff.
Right.
Like where if we say we're just going to, as a routine, let people know 6 months ahead of time that they have the
We could-
ability to request an extension and like.
We could put that in the resolution. We could add into the resolution that staff will notify landmark recipients that haven't utilized their grants, no later than like between 9 and 6 months of the grant expiring. We can add that as a section, and then they'd be notified, and then then they'd be notified.
That feels
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like reasonable and in like the
Yeah.
interest, the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish without like just making everything
Complicated.
perpetual.
Or perpetual, yeah.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then it becomes formal so that we do it just by course of the resolution, and that future staff will also know, because it'll be in the resolution that they have to do that or obligated to do that.
I mean, I think part of our outreach education piece too is for applicant or for landmark owners to understand, and the buyers, like just to understand all those limitations to some extent of like, I don't know. That's just a whole other piece of it, but yeah.
I mean, I'm somewhat sensitive to, I like some of the stuff that is coming up in this conversation, as far as, you don't want to almost punish somebody for doing it early and being a trendsetter or being one of the first ones to do it. So I can appreciate that side of it. And I do feel like it feels like a little bit of a raw deal if you came in at a time when we just didn't have the same amount of funds or anything of that sort. So I'm trying to be somewhat sensitive to that. I wonder if you could just at some point say, if anybody that was under not the one we're trying to move on from right now, but the previous one that was $5,000 or less, or if they only had the $1,000 bonus, the incentive to even do it, could they come up to the proposed one and be at a 25% of, just trying to at least throw a bone that way of, you guys were here in the original portion, could we be able to give you something to go towards?
Or if we say like 15 years, like if we make it like an amount of time following their original landmarking, that they can come back for something like that.
Or just some other way that we don't have to encumber so much for funds. Like, we can't do it for every house, right? Or we just can't do anything for a long time right now. But I'm wondering if there's some other way for up to this certain date, you could come up to participate in this new program right now, but it's at a reduced portion of it, just, because we can't do anything else with that. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud again and trying to help, but I don't know that we have the funds to go, it's all there every time.
Could it be written in that it's under a request for extending it, a landmark property that hasn't used grant money previously can come back and request the grant assistance under whichever we decide amounts based on availability of funds, and I don't know how detailed you get into it, of without encumbering future funds, so that you say, all right, you're rolling the dice, mister, if you're going to wait and wait and wait, because if we have other projects that are accepted and have been approved and we've encumbered those funds, you take very low priority to all the other new ones that are coming in that haven't been approved yet and maybe able to be approved with what's in there right now. And I don't know, that it's going to be a very tedious thing of trying to figure out how exactly you would word it to say, well, it's only possible for you to extend this if you're willing to roll the dice to see if maybe there's funds available at that time, because we're not going to hold funds aside for you to come back and request $50,000 more. If there's some availability and we have surplus at that time, it'll be considered in the decision-making process.
So a parking garage.
Pardon?
Parking garage.
So to take Commissioner Anderson's idea too, which I think kind of blends this, is if you haven't gotten funds, is what I'm hearing both of you say, then you can come back. So first of all, you can't, you hadn't received any other than the incentive, of course. And then there's a question of maybe you come in under a percentage, like 25% of the existing. So, 25% of the existing without extraordinary circumstances is like on a residential.
Without it, you're looking at right around 31?
31. So that's something that I feel like there's a limited pool of homes that never took advantage of it. It provides flexibility and benefit. So I don't think we're like overexposing the fund to anybody and everybody, and it limits it, and then it provides the fairness of somebody, whether they were a successor to the landmarking or the original landmarker, it doesn't matter. They can still have access to some funds in the future. I think that feels like an equitable way to do it that also balances protecting the fund. Now, on top of that, you could put a 10 or 15-year time limit or keep it completely unlimited, which I think would be fine too.
Well, and I almost feel like the person that took the $5,000 at that time, that they could come in for 25% of whatever minus the $5,000, like that's already part of that. I do feel, again, I don't know what the number of homes is then.
Yeah, we could get more data. Again, I think then again, are we incentivizing people to landmark their property, or are we just wanting to pay people to maintain landmark properties? I think it's a philosophical question about the purpose of the fund. Not even philosophical. I think the ordinance says that you can only use these funds to create incentives for landmarking. Yep. It's not to maintain it. So I think if you feel fairly, like people being able to come in open-ended, and that's incentivizing others to landmark, then I think that's, my opinion is that's stretching the meaning of an incentive, but if you feel like it's a meaningful incentive, that would be something that we could put in there.
Well, I think to me, I like the idea of having some openness because of the people that do it just for the sake of landmarking, like just the ones that are not after the grant, but they also don't want to give that up for future owners or their family or whatever in the future. Like that's a big deal to landmark for the good of the community and then be cut off from any funding in the future. So So I think the 25% or some percentage might be a good option. Because I was thinking like, well, what if you just bumped up to the whatever grant fund was the next in front of, like, if you were, 2015, you just get to bump up to the next.
I've thought about that too.
Yeah.
Climbing statue.
Right, but then it's, I don't know, that's,
A little bit more subjective with costs that change.
right. So the percentage just seems a little, yeah. And then the next thing would be if we say, okay, you can do the percentage, but do we open up the whole, like, and you can ask for exception, like extraordinary and exceptional, like, or do we just say,
I would almost
you
cap
can't
it
do that?
at
Like
tier two.
that's a hard cap. Like we're giving you an extension. You have 25% of the current funds, but that's it. Like I think that would need to be, because otherwise there's, it's just open again.
But why 25%? That's going to be the question right off is where'd that magic number come from? Josh, was there a specific?
0.
It's bigger than 0? It is bigger than 0.
I was trying to, so just looking at, essentially we're looking at doubling the numbers right now. Let's just take residential right now. We're going from 50 to 100. I mean, essentially we're doubling things. There are, it seems like there could be circumstances like somebody that came in tonight, which, to be honest, he bought a house that was landmarked, that was in a certain condition at the time. He got into every bit of that knowing the condition of the house. I mean, you have an inspector go in and everything else. I appreciate that he's trying to do something, and he has to go through landmark and
Alterations.
and everything else. And he's required to do that right now. And he might not have known some of that, but it is one of those items that that house was in a condition at the time he bought it. It feels like you should be helping somebody like that. I just don't know if for me, that far out, knowingly going into something that it speaks of, we should go all the way to, if you want to come back in short time here, you're 136 plus. I don't know if we have the funds to do that. I can tell you that the funds we have right now, I can almost guarantee you they're going to get hit hard in this next year. They're going to hit real hard.
But that's almost guarantee. We just had Marshall Fire recently, right?
Yeah.
That's a reality of an extraordinary situation.
Yeah.
And any projects that are in the pipeline right now, if something extraordinary comes up like that again, that puts a halt to everything going on in Louisville and things change for 4 more years like they did,
I
do you
think
say, well, I kind of lost my train of thought.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
didn't interrupt you. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just saying the 25% though, I think is if it's around 30,000, that seems, at this point, that seems pretty in the middle of a lot of our grants. Like it's definitely more than 5,000. And I mean, we hovered around 40-ish for a long time. And so 30 seems like a pretty, at this point, generous for someone who hasn't done anything up to this point. So I was just kind of going back to the 25% was where my train of thought was going.
My mind just keeps going back to it's impossible for us to foresee what may happen in the next few years even, let alone 10 years from now. And to try to put a percentage that makes sense of the current project or of the current rules or even a hard dollar on it, to me, is just, it's not, there's no link to me, why 25%? Why $30,000? Why is it that if you're
Unless you
the new
just
person doing it?
inflation adjusted the original grant.
Right.
That's one possible.
Yeah, and I would say, we're going to come back to this in 3 years, we think, and update the grants. We don't have to wait 3 years. If it doesn't work or you don't like it, you could also make a recommendation to City Council to make a change. So all of our numbers are, they're not based on hard, right? Like this, again, we're taking our best guess, an informed guess, I would say, on what it takes to fill the gap to incentivize someone to landmark instead of tearing it down. So I do think, it doesn't have to be perfect, that number. if that feels equitable and right for someone who never received grant funding in order to do some reasonable work on their home if they need it.
It's a good point that if we are taking into consideration that probably in 3 years, we're looking at revising if necessary, because that's the time that the grant issue, the tax issue is coming up again.
And this would be for,
So it's only at foreseeing what's happening for the next 3 years, not for the next 30 years.
and this would be for properties that are already landmarked, too.
Correct.
So it just
Right, landmarked, but no grant money was
So the
taken.
incentive, like we've already incentivized them somehow because they did it, whether it was just for the good of doing it or because of grants. So the incentive's already there. And this is more of a, like, forget, like, it's okay, we'll still,
Right. It's
still
landmarked
get-
and
yeah, we'll
it's
still-
landmarked and it's exceeded the number of years.
right,
Because I want to stay fair with
Right.
what we've just done with the property the city bought and resold. We're holding them to the standard of,
Right.
you've got 60 months
exactly.
from the time this landmarking gets approved, correct? That they're being held to the
The contract.
It'd be
60 months to use, or 3 months,
36
years plus 5. plus.
9 years total. I don't know what's
I
happening.
don't know what it is here.
Tell those there.
So just in response to why the 25% a little bit, one thing is it's incentive program that's been stated before.
Not you. Oh, maybe it is you.
Get your phone.
No, it's not you. I was doing it earlier, too.
You guys can pass this around.
There you go. Just figuring that out, huh? It's an incentive program, so we're trying to get people to come in and landmark the stuff. My thought with the 25% was it's essentially half of what we have currently right now. So that's where I'm a numbers person. I just have to come up with a number somehow that sits in there and it makes sense that you can start analyzing. So half of what it is currently, so it'll be a quarter of what we're proposing. My thought is it's the olive branch that you're extending to people that aren't eligible at all. So I understand where you guys are at. Like, I really want to help people out. I want to help everybody out as much as we can. For me, it was a way to say, could we extend the olive branch to you? Like, it's available here. I know you went in as good intentions. We didn't have the funding we
It's not you.
do right now, but we appreciate what you did. You know, like, we're not trying to totally lock you in. Maybe at some other point, we have $20 million in there. We can do
But going
whatever we
back to what
want.
Rob said, as far as incentivizing, that kind of goes against incentivizing landmarking. It's really just, I'm almost coming.
Full circle.
Coming back.
Yeah.
At the same
Yeah.
time, it could also incentivize people, 'cause if they know this ahead of time, like, if you, buzzing while you were talking, so but if people know, like, going forward especially, like, if we don't use our money in the in allotted time, it incentivizes them to take advantage of the program ahead of time versus, like, getting a fraction of something later, you know? So I think it's probably something we should have put in place earlier, but I think it can also act to kind of light a fire under people of, like, you know, do it so that you're not cut short later.
And I think it also does incentivize some people who want to landmark, knowing that they don't have the funds or ability to do work that's grant eligible for some time, but they can still get something later down the road should they do that. And I think rehabilitation, structural work, the program is set up to incentivize to landmark, but that I think that is within the realm of incentivizing to landmark.
And so this would be, because I was kind of saying it would be for new ownership, but we're kind of saying it's for anyone. We don't care. Okay.
I think it's the house.
Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm.
It's just that it expired,
Yeah,
can they come back and ask for an exception?
right.
Is that correct? That's what we're trying to get.
And that would
If it's
cover
expired
anything.
and they never used it.
Right.
Say that again?
If it's expired and they never used any of the original.
Right. So
Potential.
they got it. they
Besides
got
their
it approved,
bonus. Or that would,
expired,
yeah.
was never used, can that one come back then, whether it's the original owner or somebody else, can one come back for that property and request funds? And if they can, are they requesting funds at that year's grant program, or are they requesting funds based on, or are they just requesting the release of the funds that were approved originally, that expired?
If I'm being completely honest, I feel like my inclination is to like not do any of this.
Not do anything?
To warn people that it's gonna expire, and so that we're like operating in good faith
And not even
and giving
opening
them
it up,
opportunities to renew, and then
just being done. I mean, I can see
Yes.
benefits to all of it, for sure.
And so with that being said, just to clarify our purpose right now, it sounds like we're not sending this whole package forward. So is this conversation, I mean, we're not approving any of this right now.
Yeah, you're not
it sounds
approving
like. So,
anything, yeah.
You know, a lot of thoughts have been shared and staff can collate those and people can, you know, perhaps think on these for the next time we come back and discuss. Is that an option? Or do we need a more
we
formal?
could come back with some options, because I think we do need to approve it at the next one, so we want something pretty concrete for you all to react to. So I'm hearing kind of two different options. You know, one is we give them the 6-month warning and then say, hey, like, if you're not gonna be here in time, come in and ask for an extension. And then we can give them an extension. So we could draft that, or we could draft if you've never gotten a grant, then you can come in under the current ordinance up to 25%, or we could change the number. So those are the two things I've heard the most discussion about. So I think
Right.
if you're kind of ready to move on, I think we could come back, we could draft both options and present both options to you at the next meeting. Or we can get a consensus direction and just draft one. I'll leave that up to you all.
And then whether we draft one or two, let's say we draft one, would that need to be unanimously approved? Or
No,
by
just a
of
majority.
votes? Okay, just trying to clarify like where we are with
Yep.
this.
One quick question, just thinking out loud again, is if we did do anything with retroactive, the 25% lot, anything of that sort, could we do it as an addendum to add to it, where we could, if we didn't have a consensus or a majority on the regular one, that we could just drop that off and push forward with everything that we pretty much feel like would go through right now? Is that an odd question?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
If we can't figure it out within the next month,
Oh.
can we table it and add it as an addendum like 6 months from now?
Sure,
9
you
months
can
from now?
always,
Like,
you can recommend a change to the, just like you did last year. You made a single change to the funding resolution related to HSAs outside of this process, right? So you could do that. So yeah, we could pass along any version of it, and then you can make recommendations to make changes later if you want. But I think we should come back with some amendment for you to consider next time. I feel like it's relatively easy to draft both of these options, then it'll give you more time to consider.
Can you also come back with the numbers of how many properties would this actually apply to, and what amount of encumbrance would be required?
Sure.
I think
That would be helpful.
Yeah, I think we could figure out how many properties haven't utilized any of their grant funds.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's not that many.
That would help the 25%.
Can I also ask that you have a separate number of how many are at the 5,000?
Sure.
Only from that time?
Two brackets there, right? There's the
Yeah.
early program, the 5,000 under, then there's kind of a larger number of properties and larger dollar numbers, the second kind of bracket. So to have both those would be good, kind of like differentiated.
That'll be great information to look at. The only downside I'm still seeing is it's not a static moment in time. Those numbers of how many are out there right now, who have been approved, have been landmarked, haven't taken any grants. What about the ones that happen in this year, next year, and the following year? But if we're saying, all right, that starts happening, then we just revisit it at that point, I guess we're okay with that. You know,
Yeah, I think this new resolution is going to have whoever landmarks in the next 3 years, they're going to be within the limits unless we don't get to our next resolution for, 4 or 5 years or more.
And then they'd only get 25%.
Yeah.
So they would actually be taking a cut if they,
if we go that way.
right, if we go that way. So I think having the two options would probably be having drafted, just so we can have the two options ready to go, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Because I kind of do see it lights a fire a little bit and says, all right,
But you're not totally cut out,
yeah.
so. Okay,
Because I think regardless, we would like to see the larger portion of what we've been talking about already move forward.
right,
Yeah.
yes, that's what we
Yes.
talked about for,
Yeah, if you
absolutely.
can't come to a resolution, we could just
Right.
keep the current language and then
Right,
keep working on it.
Right, and there was one other part that you guys were gonna revise language around.
Yeah, that was the exceptional circumstances criteria. We were going to add something
gap
about.
funding, gap in funding, yeah.
And if there's any chance that we could see these things that you're going to work on and present to us again prior to the rest of the agenda and the rest of the packet being ready, because it's a lot for us to absorb and to try to take in a couple of days over one weekend. I know there's a lot of stuff that's time limited. You have to wait to a certain point before you can put together your whole information packet for us.
Yeah.
But if this revised stuff that you can do can come out sooner than later, it'll help us have some time to.
We can probably send some stuff to you early, but you can't deliberate or communicate with each other on it.
That's fine.
But if you need more time just to look at it and think about it, we could try to get you the information earlier.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, okay. Anything else before we close that section?
Okay.
Yeah. Seems like we're in a good place. All right, our next item is work plan and subcommittee updates.
You don't have a microphone up there now, so
Oh, yeah.
I can't hear you with the microphone, let alone without.
Do you still use that?
I got hearing aids in, but got them turned up max.
Oh, because are they connected to the sound
just
system?
hearing
'Cause that
No,
other
but
thing
when
had-
I can, my hearing aids pick up what they can.
I was also mumbling, Talbot. I'm sorry, talking to myself. Okay, so the next item is work plan and subcommittee updates. So the first one, the grant program update, will come back to you, of course, next month with those changes and those new draft amendments. And then I'll just go through each subcommittee and I'll hand it off to you to give an update. So the first is the online map, and that's Josh and Linda.
I have no update, but how about the first week of October? I will reach out and put a date that we can talk. Okay, thank you.
Do you both need GIS support with that item as well? Because I did meet with our GIS staff person last week.
It looks like everything's back up as far as maps and stuff like that now that I saw. I could use some input on just approach, and then we could talk about it after that.
Okay, just let me know. The next item is the Old Town Walking Tour, and that's Sloan and Linda.
We don't have anything new to report.
Okay. The next one is the updated brochure and flyer, and that's Sloan and Marty.
Go ahead. Sure.
We had a meeting.
We did.
Do you want me to explain what we talked about in that meeting, or do you want?
Sure,
to
why don't you explain and I can jump in?
Okay, so we met with city staff to talk about in what ways they can support what we're doing and their broader initiatives actually about keeping sort of the branding universal throughout all the different programs in the city. So it was a timely conversation about how do we update our materials within that context. And also Jess is working on a grant application to help with funding the updated materials that we're hoping to generate.
That's right. Yeah, and so we also talked about capacity as well. The key thing being the updated brochure, but then also timing it with the grant program update as well. And then just updating other materials that would potentially be funded by that outreach grant. So yeah, we are working on a grant that's going to be submitted. It's through the Certified Local Government Program, so it'll be around $9,000 to hopefully support that updated brochure. And we'll find out in the new year on that. So in the meantime, we're going to work on the content as well and look at some examples to include in that brochure. All right, next one is events. Chrissy and Talbot.
Nothing new to present.
Yeah, I know we finished our events for this year. Okay, that's the end of that item. And then for staff updates, as Rob mentioned earlier, 1016 Main is currently under contract with a new property owner. 1155 Pine Street, you considered this historic preservation and grant application at the last meeting. It was withdrawn by the applicant, so it will not be proceeding to City Council, just as an FYI. And then as I mentioned, we're applying for the Certified Local Government Grant. And then the next regular meeting is November 17th at 6:30 p.m. And then I'll hand it off to you for commission member updates.
I have a question. Going back to 1155 Pine, they've withdrawn their request, so what we approved at that meeting is gone. I saw the property's up for sale now. So that property is not going to be landmarked at this point.
No.
So this is another example of how do we incentivize these things and not. And in that case, we did incentivize it to some point, part of the request. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding. All right, they said, no, forget it, I'm just going to sell it. Okay.
Outreach to the realtor to provide some education to the new buyer if we can't get in front of them ourselves.
Well, in this case, it doesn't matter. A new buyer would be starting from scratch.
Right.
And going through the process all over, correct? Even though we approved landmarking of that property. Is that correct? Do I understand that? Rob, do you know, since 1155 was approved as a landmark property, not the other auxiliary building, but just the residents there, they said, now forget it.
Right, so I think the question is if somebody purchased the property and wanted to take the existing application forward to City Council, I don't know that they would be prohibited from doing that if they wanted the exact same application to move forward to City Council. So it came with a very specific alteration certificate. So I think that's where it would get hung up. I don't know that the new owner would want to develop that exact same plan, more than the landmark itself.
Right. Thanks.
Commissioner updates? All right. Our last item is to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.